You know, sitting in the forest on a day like this is where I have my awakening. It's not the exact same spot where I'm at now, but I often come here or to the forest to just sit and be quiet. So at the time, I was going through, well, I would say, a challenging time, to say the least. And yeah, I just was just post the COVID era, and I just finished a training to become a survival outdoor instructor. So I spent a lot of time in the forest back then. There's a really funny bird just zooming over here. Um, and yeah, so I decided to sign up for another course that was 4 days in the forest, and it was about animal tracking and bird language. So for 4 days, with a group, we went into the forest. We slept there, and during the day, we walked around the area to see what animal tracks and trails we could find, to learn about different ways animals would move and how you could see that, how you could spot different patterns, for example. But also, it was about learning uh, about bird language and how the forest communicates, basically. So, as you can hear in the background, there's a bird that's tweeting. And so he is giving a signal to the birds around him um, about something going on somewhere on the ground. It could be about me, because I was just before this, I was moving a little bit. So when I arrived to the spot, the birds really started to alarm. And then after a while, while I was sitting here for a bit and quieting down, the birds also quieted down. So that's what they do. They notify each other when something's happening. So that could be about a person, could be about a snake. And it also depends on the energy of the person sometimes. For example, if you're walking with a really kind of frustrated, angry pace, then you will hear that the alarms or the sounds of the birds will be louder than when you're really quiet and calm. So it's funny to notice that. Um, but back to those 4 days in the forest. So every day, I sat by myself somewhere in silence with assignment to get acquainted with what was happening around me, to listen for patterns of the birds. And the funny thing is, I really got a lot of insights in how that works and everything, which is amazing. But what was super unexpected was the realization that I had, or the epiphany or awakening, I always call it. Because after sitting there for 4 days, I remember on the fourth day, I sat at the edge of a forest somewhere, and there was a sand plain in front. And the reason I was sitting there was because in the evening, generally there were some roe deer who would cross the plain. They would go to the other side to look for food. And often in the evening around dusk, they would come out and they would cross the plain, and then we'd be able to see them. And it was me and two other participants in the group who were also interested to see the deer. So during the day, we were spotting the tracks where they would normally walk. So when we were sitting on the edge of the forest somewhere, it was a little small hill, kind of like the hill I'm sitting on now a little bit. And we both sat maybe 50 meters away from each other or something. I don't know the exact distance, but we were quite far apart. So we all had a moment to really also be by ourselves with our own energy and to really connect to what was going on around us. And so the thing is that one of the participants, she had a fear of being alone in the dark. And she asked us, can I stay with you guys? And then when we go back to the camp in the evening, then we all walk back together. Um, and of course, we did that. And then it was getting really dark. And at one point, I thought, okay, the deer are not coming, or the deer are not coming. But I had this really amazing thing happen that I still find quite hard to describe, but I'll do my best. So I sat there and I noticed there was some birds chirping. Suddenly the birds started to chirp around me. Well, I'd been sitting there for a while, so it was not because of me. And there was a big bird of prey that landed in a tree somewhere. I think it was a falcon, but I'm not 100% sure. Or a sparrow, I think it was. No, it's not called a sparrow in English. I don't remember. It was a bird of prey. And it landed in the treetop. And I remember suddenly all the birds started to go off, and some of the birds fled. And as soon as that happened, the birds were moving, flying off. Then all of a sudden, everything quieted down again. I remember I had this wave of energy flowing through me. And suddenly, I felt a lot of emotion come up, and I suddenly had a really strong feeling that I was part of that forest in that moment, and that everything around me was one. And this is why I find this hard to explain, because when you explain it, it sounds really kind of, hmm? um, but that feeling for me was so profound that it really changed something, because I just suddenly sensed that we are all in our own ego bubble, and we are all just holding ourselves back with our conditioning and patterns that we've learned. And I was at a point in my life where I was really wondering, what is it that I want to do? I've been searching for super long, tried a lot of things, and I suddenly had that realization that this ego bubble around me was keeping me stuck, and that I was the only person keeping myself stuck, and that the only person that could actually free me was me. And yeah, that may sound, I feel like explaining that or saying that sounds a bit cliche, but it was really a huge insight in that moment. And so that's where I decided I am not going to be held back by what anyone else thinks of me, what fears I have. I'm just going to do the things I want to do, no matter what, no matter the consequences, because I rather die than not do it. That was the point I was at. And yeah, and that sense of everything's one really helped me feel very safe at the same time, because I felt there is no, yeah, there is no separation, not really, underneath it all. So, and I think, yeah, I used to try to meditate before that, and every now and then I had a nice meditation and I tried it, but it never really stuck, and I never really got the skill. But then after this happened and I came home, I really got into meditation, and it was super easy because I felt what it felt like to connect to that core that's underneath everything. And I think that really helped me to want to go back to that. Um, so yeah, it's just connecting to that essence of what's really true and what's really here, and that's, I believe, everyone can learn to connect to. But it takes some practice, maybe, or it takes the right moment, or some skill, or it takes a rock bottom situation, maybe, where you just have nothing to lose and you just go there. But whatever it is, I believe, if you're not at that point, or you want to experience it, I think meditation is the is a really great way to get there. I know for other people it's been breath work, or it's been other modalities, ceremonies, plant medicine, all kinds of things. But for me, meditation is really my go-to thing to experience this feeling. But then the funny thing, what happened right after that moment, is that so it was almost dark. Suddenly we heard this galloping of some animals, and that was the herd of roe deer that came out of the forest from the other side of the plain. There were 7 of them, and this was where it got super, super weird. So we tracked where their trails were, where their tracks were, where they would normally walk, and where it would be very unlikely for them to walk. We were really not sitting in any way in their way. And so one of the participants, the one that, said before she was very scared to be there in the first place, the deer stormed out of the forest, and they did not storm the way that they normally would, but they came right at her. And they stopped in front of her, 2 of the male deer. They're huge animals and pretty intimidating. If you sit there and suddenly these herd of deer comes galloping at you, that's, as you can imagine, pretty terrifying. And so what I noticed, because I was a little bit further away, was that they ran over there to her. Then they took a moment, and then they stormed past. And it was so silent And suddenly felt the whole plane just moving, and all the energy was just, and then it gone back down again. It was really unexpected and really beautiful at the same time, and it happened right after that moment of insight that I had, and it was just really, amazing, weird, strange at the same time. So then I walked down the hill, and the other two also walked down. And I remember that she was super overcome by what happened, of course. And it brought up a lot of, yeah, fear, angst, all the things. And I remember I was just thinking in a moment, this is not a coincidence that this happened to her in this moment. But then I started thinking, but then, why did it happen? What exactly happened? And I realized that the deer, they'd been able to sense the fearful energy from a really big distance. And that was a real insight for me as well, that they could sense that. And together with what happened prior to that, where I realized everything's energy, everything's connected, there is no separation, everything's one, really confirmed that, the fact that the deer could sense that, they could sense in a way what I had just sensed. And because I realized everything's one, I realized everything's connected through its energy, means that the energetic space around us is just energy, but it's less dense than obviously, us or the tangible things around us. But it's still energy. It's still, everything's connected through its energy. So because of that, we're all able to communicate with each other, with everything around us through its energy. And that was really an eye-opener for me. And when I got home after the weekend, I remember I was so, I felt everything changed. Of course, people around me didn't really see that or experience the same thing. But I got back and I just said, everything's different. Everything. And that's when the whole journey, deep dive into spirituality started for me. I did have experiences prior to this, years before, that for me were confirmation of the soul is still here after we pass away. So I somewhere had that sense and that knowing in some way, but I never really knew what to do with that or how that would help me or how to, I didn't feel the need to dive into it further, I guess. But I always felt one day I will get into spirituality. And then after this weekend, I got home and this was it for me. And it really, my life really changed from this direction to this direction. And suddenly, everything felt really different. I got into meditation a lot. I started to learn a lot about energies. A really amazing book, by the way, I read right after I got back was called Becoming Nature by Tamarack. I hope I pronounced his name right. Really recommended, really beautiful book. And it really describes also, how we connect with nature, but also it talks a lot about tracking, animal tracking, communicating with animals. And that was really funny because I actually wrote down the title of that book 2 days before this happened. So someone else in the camp was reading it. And this is exactly what it was about. It was about how they could sense the energies, how you can show up in nature, how you can be in the energy of nature, basically. And by that I mean in the energy of stillness. So not in the head, out of the head, quiet mind. That's I wanted to add that because I remember suddenly what an impact that made. That's when my whole journey began. And that's when eventually I started to, read a lot about spirituality, about energy. I started to meditate a lot. I did some days of hour-long meditations because it was just me getting back to that feeling, but also me really starting to connect with myself and really starting to learn how to listen to, my internal state and understand how I could change my internal state and how I could, work with my nervous system, etc. And that's also when, at one point, I discovered energy healing. It sounds a bit broad because energy healing, I know, goes, many things can be put under energy healing. But when I refer to it, what I actually mean is, you may have noticed if you seen any videos on my channel, I talk a lot about the Ankh, which is not very commonly known, I guess, by people. More and more people I notice have see the Ankh in meditations or in other places, or they feel a sudden call or pull toward. For me, I um, I attended I think it was a new moon ceremony, and everybody that was there would receive like a short energy healing with an Ankh, a physical brass Ankh, and so did I. And at the time, I remember, it's funny, I was meditating a lot. And I remember when I tried to do some breathwork exercises, my um, my breath was very shallow, or was a bit short of breath. So at times when I tried to breathe in, it was kind of like this. But when I was there that afternoon, I wasn't really thinking of that. I just remember that was going on. And I laid down on the mat. The healer started to do the healing. And I remember within minutes, it felt like this huge boulder was put onto my chest. And at the same time, this huge boulder was pulled off my chest. Super weird feeling. And all these emotions came up, and I started to cry, sobbing. I couldn't stop. Yeah, so all the emotions started to come out, and I remember it went on for maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something. At one point, I stopped crying, and I felt, and suddenly I noticed I can breathe deeply again. And that's, for me, was the moment when I thought, okay, I have to learn how to do this. And so that was the next step on my discovery journey, which obviously I'm still on. We all are. Um, but so I started to look into energy healing, about the Ankh, what does it mean, what can it do? And then I remember I wanted to learn Reiki, which is pretty commonly known as a form of energy healing. In case you don't know what Reiki is, it's a way to pass on life force energy, to cleanse your energetic blockages and your energy system, basically. And you do that through hand postures. You can do that over a distance or in person. So I remember I started with that, and then the Ankh followed after that. But what I learned when I started to do Reiki was that I was able to sense energies in people's bodies. And, I probably always were able to do that, but I was never aware of that, or not consciously. And because I was meditating a lot, I could really connect to that. And oh, look, a whole bunch of birds. Anyway, there's another one. So I remember on the first day that I learned to do Reiki. I remember I had put my hands on someone's shoulders, and I got into a meditative state immediately. And then I remember I felt exactly where in her body she had pain. And she looked at me and she's like, "How do you know that?" And I remember not also being kind of flabbergasted, like, I have no idea. I don't know, I just feel it. And that's really opened the the consciousness around, the clairs, like clairsentience for me. And so that was another huge eye-opener of knowing that that's possible. And then when I started to learn about the Ankh eventually, so I started to, practice with Reiki a lot more. Also to do Reiki over distance and, use it for my own healing, first and foremost, of course. And Reiki really helped me, in the moments when I was going through all my fears and stuff, because, I pledged to myself when I was in the forest that day, I am going to do what I really feel I should be doing, no matter the consequences. And of course, that sounds really, wow, very cool. But when you actually go and do it, you run into a lot of fears, a lot of issues, a lot of, your own limitations. And still to this day, I'm going through that, obviously. But Reiki's really helped me with releasing those fears and anxieties and stuff. It still helps me. The same for the Ankh. I learned to use the Ankh later on, and the Ankh is basically an accelerator of the energy. So it amplifies the energy, and it's a really powerful tool to, cleanse your energy as well. And but I'll talk more about that on my channel, so I won't go into it too much in this video. But I still use that a lot, And I think the funny thing is I'm talking to you now in this video. It took me a really long time and a lot of work to be able to do this. Because for me, it's been a really big thing. If you would have asked me, let's go bungee jumping, let's go skydiving, let's go deep dive in the ocean at 3 in the morning, I would be, let's go. But when it comes to making a video, I was like, I don't know. But having these tools, using energy healing, using meditation, using the time to come to nature and, be in stillness, feel what's going on within me and, release any feeling, sadness, to give it space. It's really helped me a lot in my process, and it's still helping me a lot in my process. And yeah, it's been a really beautiful journey. And I was sitting here and this just came up, so there you go.